I'm going to share some words first, and then we'll go into a moment of silence. So I share these words by the Reverend Derek Jackson, and then I'll ring the chime to mark the beginning and the end of our silence. Following that, we'll sing together. He writes, "I am tired of being resilient." He writes, "It is hard enough navigating society as a black gay male. Then add to it climate change, pandemics, daily life is exhausting. I understand that sometimes things occur that call us to draw on our resilience, but it should not be a way of life. It is not helpful or healthy for us to be in a constant state of struggle. Eventually, it takes a toll on our mental, emotional, and physical health." In August 2022, NPR's Life Kit had an episode entitled, "Why You Should Stop Complimenting People for Being Resilient." It was an interview with therapist Lourdes Dolores Follins, who shared that resilience comes out of the institutions of slavery and colonization. And although framed as an expression of liberation, resilience is actually a tool of oppression. It praises us for succeeding against adversity without addressing whether that adversity should exist in the first place. Lourdes asks us to change our relationship with resilience and ask ourselves, what can we do to change these things that people have experienced? What can we do to get rid of sexism? What can we do to get rid of homonegativity? What can we do to get rid of ableism? What can we do to get rid of economic deprivation? What can we do to get rid of all the things that force people to be resilient? And so, this year, let's release resilience. I want to reframe the conversation so that we're not talking about how resilient we are, but what are the issues and systems that cause us to be resilient? How can we fix those issues and systems? I want us to move away from the idea that we must survive as individuals and instead thrive through our communities. I pray that we may all be in a place where we can live our lives fully, just as we are, without constant threats to those lives. And here's the prayer. Spirit of hope, defiant goddess, caring God, in the face of adversity, open our hearts, so that we may name the hurt and the pain, and then release them into the loving embrace of community. Surround us with care, so that when we fall, we will be lifted up and carried forward. Holy ones, help us to move from resilience to resistance, focusing not on what makes us strong, but on removing the systems that oppress us so that we may live fully, not existing, but thriving. Blessed be. So how many people here, probably a few of you I would imagine were here in the 70s and 80s, I think, probably not you. How many remember this commercial? How many of you remember this commercial that we're going to play right now, hopefully? There we go.
In Japan, the hand can be used like a knife. But this method doesn't work with a tomato. That's why we use the Ginsu. It's a knife that no kitchen should be without.
All right. Thank you so much. Remember that? Yeah, I haven't seen that in a long time. So apparently this Ginsu knife, I never had one, it just doesn't become dull, if you can believe it. But let me assure you, the human spirit does. Especially during doing the work that our UU values commit us to do. Burnout, it's common. And I'm talking about burnout, I'm talking about reaching a point, you've probably all felt it, of chronic exhaustion. A state of despondency that just begins to feel like this is irreversible. The social action consultant Kathy Obear called this type of burnout passion fatigue. Can anyone relate to that? Passion fatigue? How many of us are overcommitted? I'm not going to ask, never mind, I'm not going to ask for a show of hands because I bet you're too tired to even raise your hands at this point. Keep them down. How many of us have felt our passion for the social justice work we do, fade? And not because we care less, but because we're focusing too much on we have to have quick results, or we're agonizing about all the steps backwards rather than focusing on the steps forward. How many feel one person, it just can't really make a difference? Or even a community like this. How many feel we can't make a dent in the larger social justice fight, given this counter barrage of ignorance and anger and hate? It's real. And that's passion fatigue. Social justice agents like us are especially prone to this type of despondency because of a high level of compassion, leading to the need to do it all, to say yes to everything, despite the fact that there isn't such a thing as a Ginsu person. One of Kathy Obear's workshop participants put it pretty plainly, and in the story Leo put it pretty plainly too. When everything is a priority, nothing is. Nobody can slice, dice, chop, and julienne without ever wearing down, especially after being battered and bruised again and again. Sometimes we find ourselves up against a tomato of a problem, and having worn ourselves down to a dull nub, we have nothing to properly slice through it. However, passion fatigue, let me assure you, it's not an excuse to ignore the work that needs to be done, especially if one, like me, can step back and can sharpen. It's not an excuse to give in to white fragility or a self-satisfied complacency stemming from whatever level of privilege we each have. As Robin DiAngelo puts it, this isn't about giving up or even taking a break. It's about how to fight for justice from a position of internal strength. The reading we just heard, Derek Jackson, that I read at the meditation, I read it because it communicated so eloquently that although resilience is necessary and of course helpful, many people have no choice but to be resilient, forced into a burnout through no lack of effort to prevent it. And therefore, those of us who can leverage our privilege to prepare ourselves for fighting the fight while avoiding burnout have the responsibility to do that. We must keep our tools honed, or we cannot change the policies and change the systems that not only cause, but force others to resiliency beyond reason. So let's commit. Let's commit together to a constant regimen of the best self-care that we can in order to care for others. Ask yourself, what incredibly amazing things. I'm so excited about the amazing things. What incredibly amazing things could you do if you weren't so burnt out? Imagine if you rid yourself of that guilty feeling that you are never doing enough. I work at Children's Hospital Los Angeles, and I met a mom whose infant son was waiting on a heart for a long time, a heart transplant. And when the heart finally came, she considered leaving his side a little bit before the procedure so she could spend some relaxing time with her husband and with her other son. But she felt so guilty for even thinking of doing this at such a critical time before the transplant. But then she remembered how tired she'd been lately, waiting months and months and months for that heart. And that if she was going to be there 100% capacity over the next few days and the next few months, as her son recovered from this transplant, she needed to rest. She needed to reset. Her self-care was for him. Just this week, I made an emergency appointment myself, last week actually, for 2 root canals because I had some chipped teeth that I'd neglected for quite a few years. And they got infected. So I missed time with my patients at the hospital, my family over those few days, because I put my own care off. Had I planned the procedures earlier, I could have done so on a timeline that wouldn't cause me to have neglected others. I didn't borrow the money at first from my family, which I could have for pride reasons. But it turned out I had to swallow that pride more painfully to borrow even more at the last minute for this emergency. Even the Ginsu knife is only guaranteed for 50 years. I'm 52. I know. And I know I said passion fatigue is chronic and it's intense. More than just getting one good night's sleep before work or something like that. But missing sleep, for instance, regularly adds up. And it's the simple habits in the short term, those simple habits, that stave off burnout in the long term. It's about prioritizing what really matters, beginning with self-care. The poet Audre Lorde said, "Caring for myself, it's not self-indulgence, it is self-preservation." And that is an act of political warfare. But wait, there's more. Today's talk won't just be a pep rally. I'm not Tony Robbins. If I wanted to make millions of dollars like that, I wouldn't have become a UU minister. If I can generate, however, critical thought that leads to action, transformative change, opening the way for all people to become as fulfilled as they desire on their own terms, then I'm rewarded with something that is much deeper and is much richer and is much more valuable than money. And what's more, only a UU minister can glean a theological lesson from a cheesy 50-year-old commercial for Japanese steak life. Take that, Tony Robbins. And here it is. Life on earth is the sacred knife that does the work of making the divine salad. Whatever you consider divine, whether you believe in God of the universe, or your divinity is the terrestrial or the celestial wonders of existence, or the ability within human spirit to transform itself and society for the better, whatever you consider divine, we, life on earth, are the tools that do the divine work, or if you prefer, through which the divine work is done. It's only through the lens of us living creatures that earth's beauty is recognized as divine. Miraculous change has never happened, I would say, without the action or without the interaction of living beings. Living beings to comprehend that it is a miracle. Living beings to take action. We are those knives. And since we're not Ginsu people, we have to make sure we're in the best repair possible, or that divine good, however you understand it, will not be manifested. Theology. Boom. We can, and we also do harm. Do harm. Didn't read that before I wrote it. Thank you. So when that hand comes down on the tomato, it splatters everywhere and it makes a mess. And if our mental and our spiritual and our physical faculties are not tuned to a sharpened edge, we cause damage. And more than just squirting tomato pulp. Passion fatigue leads to frustration. It leads to anger. It leads to carelessness. So much more that does more harm than it actually does good. When you commit to just one more thing, this has to be done. By sucking it up, just working through the pain and the exhaustion, which sometimes you have to do, please consider that you might also be hurting others and making things worse. Even in the process of genuine, heartfelt work, we can cause damage when we are less than mindful, when we are less than awake, when we are less than aware. So if efforts to fix the broken system are ill-considered and we're ill-prepared for them, the system may not only stay broken, it may break even more. Can't let that happen. Another of Kathy Obert's workshop participants, really need to meet these people, they're very wise. They put it well when they acknowledged, when I am not my best self, I often show up in ways that perpetuate the very oppression I am committed to dismantling. So, for instance, if I hang a picture with a worn and a stripped screw, it may stay for a little while, but it's more likely to fall. I wouldn't make a meal for my family with a rusted pan. And most of us have actually watched the 10,000 cooking shows that are on TV, so we know that what happens when a knife is dull? Well, it takes more pressure to use, and it slips off the food easier, and it results in more finger cuts. If your mind and your body and your spirit are worn like that dull knife, you get irritable more quickly. You jump to conclusions, assumptions, and fall back on prejudices. At least I do. When we are used up, we are quicker to fight and slower to feel and to forgive. And when that happens, we slip easier, more often, harming ourselves and harming others. We are not Ginsu, but we can take care of ourselves as much as possible. But I can't afford a fancy knife, you might say. And the Ginsu is no longer only $19.95, you may say. Well, I have a knife at home that's dull. What do? I sharpen it. If something's broken, I repair it. Get another one. Even if all I had was a rusty pan or a stripped screw, I'd try my best to find alternatives that were cleaner, that were more stable. I'd save up over time. I'd be patient to buy what I needed. Or just as we'd never feed our family a rusty pile of tomato pulp, the love we share with all of society, love that is interdependent, that is equitable, that is transformative, that is pluralistic, that is generous, and that is justice-oriented, that love deserves preparation with the best tool we have at our disposal and the tool that is in the best condition as possible. It deserves it. I must take the time, must make the effort to upkeep and fix myself in order to be able to fix the world. And some of us have the luxury and have the privilege to skip work for a week or buy some expensive exercise machine for our home. But many of us don't have that luxury. But I say that even if you can only take a day off or a half a day off here and there, or maybe just wake up 15 minutes early to take a walk outside, there are ways all of us can upkeep and repair the tools that are our body and our mind and our heart and our spirit. I contend. And if we are doing work, especially social justice work, which I think we've all committed to, if we're doing it without a spiritual and emotional whetstone to revitalize between actions, then we're going to be doing ourselves and those we desire to help an injustice. The reality is that we will, at some point, still find ourselves overcommitted and worn out. It's a reality. It's the nature of the work. But the next time I'm going to load donations into a truck, for instance, I'll be sure to stretch before I lift. And the other night, knowing I had to be up early to work and to preach last Sunday, and it was the hour ahead. I preached in Michigan, so it was 7:30 Pacific time, but it felt like 6:30 a.m. because it's 3 hours later there. Knowing I had to do that, I went to bed earlier than usual. It was an easy thing to do, but it allowed me to be present. Even given the high frequency of passion fatigue, I'm confident we know in our hearts that we can make a difference. We also know that transformational change, it takes time, and it takes commitment, and it takes the ability to tolerate risk and pain and setbacks. That's tough. We're aware of that. Kathy Obear wrote that this is a game of chess, not tic-tac-toe. But like me, she also believes that all this hate and resistance is actually, and hopefully, the last gasp of oppression before significant transformational change breaks through. We have to keep working at it, so we have to take care of ourselves to do that. So, conclusion, let me propose another commercial. Not rather than in Japan. In America, the Spirit can be used to end strife, sustain life. But this method doesn't work if it can't support its payload. That's because we don't have spiritual Ginsu. Our energy is spread thin, but humans can't run on electricity. But you can recharge, however, if you know the worth of yourself and others. You can sustain if you're mindful of equity and pain, and care for yourself and others, as modeled by our divine ancestor, fathers and mothers. Heed Ayan Lavanzant, who said, "Life will let you get away with something for a while, but sooner or later you will pay the price. When you get the bill, let's be prepared to pay." So how much would you pay for a spirit like this? Well, before you answer, listen and hear. It even comes with a matching mind sharpener to make thinking a pleasure. Wait, there's more. There's much, much more. We'll give you multiple fancy tools to help the body and help the heart work together in strength. And you get our peeler that slivers liars, plus a grater that grates, that cares greatly even while it grates haters. And all of this together makes beautiful relationships possible. Now, how much would you pay? You get a renewed heart, a mind, spirit to keep slicing, dicing, and chopping unfair and violent systems. In order to serve up justice, you get them all for only the cost of spending the time to take care of yourself. It's the most incredible spirit offer ever.